been good, hasn't it? Well, I wanted to say some things. Imagine that. And so we'll go do this, do worship, and see where we go. It's been a long week for me to get to this point. I felt like in my spirit there's something that I'm supposed to release to shift us into another dimension. I don't know if I can quite get us there or not. I'll see where we can go with this. It kind of goes back to a couple weeks ago when I talked about the fellowship with the mystery and that we're to be fellowshipping with these mysteries. My goal tonight, in all honesty, is to get you to fellowship with the mystery. That's really where I'm at. I'll tie this into everything we've had the last 2 days and try to get us in a place of understanding. So Bo basically went down the path of grace. I'm going to go down the path of sound with grace. Probably say some things you've heard and probably say some things you've never heard. I'm going to start out in Psalm 89:15. And Psalm 89:15 is a song that was sang in the early 80s. Blessed is the people that know the joyful sound. Did anyone ever hear that song? They shall walk, O Lord, in the light of thy countenance. In thy name shall they rejoice all day, and in thy righteousness shall they be exalted. For thou art the glory of their strength, and in thy favor our horn shall be exalted. The word favor could be grace. And in thy grace our horn shall be exalted. So sometimes what happens is there's people who don't hear the sound, and sometimes there's many people who do hear the sound, but that is not what this verse says. It says those that know the sound. And there's a big difference between hearing and like today, you've heard a lot of stuff. The reality in this moment is you probably don't know it. Yet it says, blessed is the people that know. The blessing comes when you get in action to begin to know the sound of what was said today. And in all honesty, it was a joyful sound. You know, I know we talked about some things that seemed like a bummer and this and that, but it's like, in all honesty, grace is a joyful sound. It also says that those that do that will also walk out of it. So many times we're not walking out of it because we don't know it. And see, I'm trying to, so you have to fellowship with this joyful sound. That's really what it comes down to. You have to know it intimately. Now, grace has positioned us to hear the sounds of heaven beckoning us. And that's what grace does. It begins to pull upon us and says, I'm beckoning for you to hear something, but I'm beckoning for you to really know something. And sometimes we end up just stopping at the hearing and we don't engage the knowing. And we end up going through more beckoning and more beckoning and more beckoning. And God's wanting us to shift that into a new place because it's supposed to be a joyful sound. You know, don't frustrate the grace of God. You know, it's a joyful sound. Well, the word joyful sound is a war cry or a war blast with your voice. So what are you supposed to know? You're supposed to know a sound that's coming out of you. You see, and grace has empowered you to know the sound, not just to hear about it. I'm sick of delivering revelation that goes nowhere except out and drops. It's got to end. So every mystery of God brings us to another level of understanding of grace. Paul said, fellowship with these mysteries. Because there's going to be a process that's going to start to unpack and unfold in your life. And one of the things is, grace is there for you to begin to know the mystery, not just hear the mystery. We're a nation of hearing but not knowing. So, I'm just better figure out where I'm at. They will walk in the light of countenance. The illumination is what it means. It means the revealing of a mystery. They will walk in the revealing of the mystery. See, not hear it, walk it out. To know it in such a way. And so when we start looking at it, walking is a progression of motion from one place in space to another place in space. It's not just an empty action like a Jericho march that God never ordained. God, don't. Oh my God. The light of God is here. If we turn the lights off, maybe you can see it. Yes, this is a true story. So they turned the lights off. I still can't see it. Oh my gosh. So sounds is made up of many different tones and frequencies. I'm going to get into a little quantum physics. I'm not going to get into it real deep because we'll be here a long time. So here was the question the Lord started speaking to me. He said, are you reproducing a sound or are you resonating the sound? Are you producing the sound? And probably we can all say that we've been producing sound. You agree? But are we resonating sound? That was the question. And the difference between reproducing a sound and resonating a sound is where the source of the frequency is. What is the source? If you're producing sound, you are the source. If you're resonating the sound, somewhere else the source is at, and it's not you. You all kind of following. So it's kind of like I could do a couple things. Let's see, is there anybody around that can... Oh, Kathy can play the bass guitar. Can you just like pluck? Okay. Who can do the bass guitar? Well, we can do that. We can do that first if we get the bass guitar. We have this drum. This drum has a sound. And it's really loud. It can go slow. Can you feel it? You can feel that in the room. You know what this drum is doing? It's resonating a sound and it's beckoning you to come into the beat of it. Okay? The same thing with the bass. I guess not. Oh, here comes Jake.
It's magic, Stuart.
Now this is going to really affect you. Now how high is that? How high do you have it? That's max. Now if you would stand up there, you would feel your organs moving. I've done it before. It definitely will have an effect on you. Now what's happening, okay? What's happening is... That's enough of that worship. They shall know the joyful sound. Now what's happening was with that bass guitar, it is sending out a vibration to you saying, I want to align you to the vibration that I'm sending to you. God is the same way. He's wanting to align us. The sound of what happened this weekend was a sound to align us to a frequency of heaven that we're not experiencing. You see what's happening? And so What God is wanting us to do is not reproduce, but to resonate. It's very different. Because I can take this drum and I can grab a stick or two and I can hand it to somebody. And I can go like this and I can go, I'm going to grab mine. Okay, resonate. That's just what we do. We literally, it's like, so what we do then is we try to reproduce the sound, which what it ends up is we copy and mimic other people's sound. God's trying to get us all on the same page with the same frequency, moving in the same place. Is that grace? Could that be the basis of everything? Could that be the sound of heaven that's trying to resonate through this weekend? Every weekend is different. Every time we gather is different. So what frequencies are you allowing to set your frequency? What frequencies are you allowing? Are you allowing CNN? Are you allowing your situation? You crowding out heaven's frequency? Do you all know about medicine? Did you know that medicine only works because you have a vibration in your cell? And when you take medicine into your body, it's attracted to the vibration of your cells and attaches itself to you. That's how powerful sound is, vibration is. And the Lord started talking to me about the things of like, what have we allowed to attach to our frequency? Hence, we talked about all about that the last 2 days. Go back and look at the board back there. These are the things that are detrimental to us. These are the things God's trying to do with us. So he started talking to me about, well, he just like started talking to me. He has been talking to me. My wife is really happy. They shall know a joyful sound. And he said, well, son, what about Gideon there? He had like a torch under a vessel, an earthen vessel, had a torch burning, and he had a trumpet in his hand. And he asked me a question. This is always fun, is it not? How'd they break that earthen vessel? And they got both hands full. By a sound that was released. By a frequency that was released. Do you know how a wine glass is? You go like this. You know, it's a little brighter than that. And it resonates. And then you match your voice to that. And it breaks. What you're doing is you're bringing it into a place where it's like an overdose of sound coming into it, the very thing of what it resonates with. You've aligned yourself to resonate with it, and now there's a reaction that happens. There's something that goes on. And it's the same thing with the things that God brings into our life. Do you know when you first got saved, you really couldn't reproduce anything? You were kind of ignorant of spiritual things. But you know what you did real well? You resonated. You had tapped into heaven, and you're vibrating with what you just experienced, and you're resonating this frequency with no understanding of it, and everybody's drawn to you. And as you get older, sadly enough, we get so full of knowledge that knowledge almost deafens our resonation. And what the Lord's been really speaking to me about is you got to quit trying, and because here's what happens. When you're reproducing, you are striving. When you are reproducing, I actually had it in my notes, you're in legalism. But when you're in resonating, you're in flow. And you're flowing with Him. And you're allowing heaven to flow through you and out of you into other people's lives. And you guess which one is a life-giving sound? Not the one that's been copied and mimicked and reproduced and reproduced. You know, it's crazy. Worship teams are like buying sound effects for their stuff so it can have the exact sound of that exact moment in the song so we can copy, but there's no resonating of heaven. I better get over here on my notes. Remember Joshua? Joshua 6. They blow a trumpet. They gather. And then we march around Jericho and the walls fall down. They do another trumpet blast and boom, everything falls. First one, you know what the first trumpet was? It was a call to gather. And here's what's happened this weekend. There was a trumpet sound of a call to gather. You know what God did in the call to gather? He has tuned our frequency and set our frequency for an action. And if we don't do the second blast, it's all been for naught. And the second blast was a war cry. It was a cry to action. And what it was, why did the wall fall down? There was a resonating of heaven to remove every obstacle that was in their path. But they had to come together and tune frequency together and be in tune for 7 days, and the tune was silence. And then they came out of it. It's like kind of like an upper room experience. They came out of it with a different frequency, release it, and away it goes. So here's what the Lord told me. He said, there is a grace now present not to reproduce, but to resonate. And He's bringing us into a new era of not just producing, but resonating heaven into the earth. We are going to start becoming the carriers of sound because of the grace that's upon our life. If we can just get ourselves cleaned up, get rid of the bondage and the stuff that's like keeping you from vibrating. He said it's like this. I'm taking you from being my image into the likeness of. I produced you an image, but now I'm bringing in you in the likeness, which means you need to resonate like I resonate. Resignation. Maybe there's some that should resign. Resignation breaks open territories. Not reproducing. We talk about strategy. Here's a strategy for you. Resignation opens up heavenly portals. Resignation causes limbs to appear and miracles to come and healings to occur and deliverance to come. Because it's a sound and a frequency of heaven that's came in, and it's like, oh, I'll say it. Sozo is producing. God's way of deliverance is resonating. You see, it's different. And the outcome of resonating is fellowship. One with another, one with God. Do you know about your head? Your head puts out a frequency. Your brain wave is about a foot around your head right now. Do you know about your heart? Your heart puts out a frequency that's about 8 feet around you. They've documented it. So when we have fellowship, If I'm a ways away, I can't fellowship. I can get up close and I can't even fellowship with my brain. But I can fellowship with my heart, because what happens is when I step in, I've stepped into this 8-foot overlapping thing. And what's happening is there are frequencies coming out of my heart that's resonating with the other person. We call it bear witness. And our fellowship is supposed to be bearing witness of the grace that's upon us and what we're hearing from heaven coming through us to that other person. We're not supposed to be. You're fellowshipping with about football and mow the grass and it's like that's all out of your brain, and that's why nobody can connect with you. You can't get your pumpkin head close enough to the other pumpkin head. Who said that? So here's why gatherings occur like this. God is wanting us to step into his frequency. He's wanting us to hear something that we may have never heard before. Oh, we better roll. So the question is, when are we going to stop waiting for the next revelation and start resonating with the current ones? When are we going to start fellowshipping with them? We talked about aborting things. My gosh, we're aborting frequencies from heaven, revelations that have come, wanting another one and another one. I almost think God's going to shut it down until we do something with what we've been given. Some of you got it. That's why you're misunderstood. You're resonating with a passion burning inside of you. You fellowshipped with something from God, and you're so full of it and graced with it and everything, but then other people don't understand it. Well, they haven't been fellowshipping with that revelation. Because we're all on all these different pages. We're on 1 million pages of revelation right now. We got to get back to basics. Grace, mercy, love, and repentance. We got to get back to some of that. Oh, well, this, we'll bypass that page. I may bypass this page. Resonating is the life force of God. Reproducing is based on your skills, your understanding. Resonating is based on God flowing. He's wanting to bring us into the fullness of God, which means we are filled with who he is. I mean filled with who he is. There's all kinds of sounds in the earth. There's natural sounds and there's spiritual sounds. But the reality of it is God is speaking something to us, and we need to be really attentive to what he's speaking and then begin to fellowship with it. It's like this weekend. This weekend, we have got to fellowship with what has been given. I know you take notes. You probably never read them. It's like to fellowship with it. I love a quote from William Penn. He says, I urge you to pray less and listen more, for when you listen, you will know exactly what to pray. Came out of the Holy Experiment of Pennsylvania. Grace allows the sounds of heaven to be placed in the hearts of God's people. The sounds that God deposits is the harvest of your future. It's the future harvest that he wants to give you. So here we have a whole weekend about grace. Bill did an excellent job with what he has done and delivered. All of that, I find no fault. It was excellent. Most excellent, as Bill and Ted would say. It was most excellent. But it's what it was your future given. See, it's the future where God wants to take us. So he's dropped a sound into his spirit. You know what happened? He's fellowshipped with grace, the mystery of grace. That's why it's just so natural. It just flows. And you go, man, he really studied. No, he didn't study nothing. He's fellowshipping to the point he's resonating with it. He doesn't have to write a bunch of notes up. It's the reality of what he's living. It's in his life. It's DNA. It's came from heaven. And now he carries that sound into our midst and releases it. Why would God have him do that? So we just take some notes, have a good weekend, and walk away? No. So we could fellowship with it, so it becomes so part of us that we're carrying it to the next location. The fullest sound of grace is praise. You don't even understand that. You wrote it down. And I'm talking about free praise, freedom in praise, exuberant praise. When I don't see exuberant praise, it tells me there's not a full understanding of grace. Because if you really knew what grace was, you'd come unglued. They shall know a joyful sound. They will know a joyful sound.
Hallelujah.
Is this all right?
Yeah.
Most excellent.
Well, there's going to be somebody in the crowd.
So let me mess with some theology for just a tad. It was Ted, yeah. It's actually Titus. The Lord says to me, Paul left Titus in Crete. I'm like, okay. He said, he left him there because he was carrying a sound he was resonating with. And he left Timothy over at Ephesus because he was carrying a sound he was resonating with. And he started showing me all these guys that were doing things because of something they were resonating with, not because of something they could produce. And he says, look at my church today and look how you place people. You place them based on what you think they'll produce instead of what they resonate with because they spent time with me. And he said, so what Paul did is he didn't leave Titus there. He left the sound of grace in Crete. And he left the sound of grace in Ephesus. And he picked some guys that were resonating with the sound to go on a mission. Not what they could produce because they could speak a language, but because of what they had encountered with God. He started showing me all these things. Acts 11, you see, 22, the tidings of these came unto the ears of the church was in Jerusalem, and they sent forth Barnabas that he should go as far as Antioch, who when he came had seen the grace of God was glad. They shall know a joyful sound. You can see that scripture all through. And exhorted them with purpose of heart they would cleave unto the Lord. Here's the deal. The sound that was resonating in Antioch reached Jerusalem. A sound was heard first, Then they saw the grace. We're the exact opposite. We want to see it before we'll resonate with it. It was resonating. You know, Cane Ridge, all these revivals, you go study every one of them. Every single one of them started with a sound. Somebody began to resonate heaven into their midst, and heaven got formed in their midst, and everybody was resonating on the same page. You know about Mr. Cox, don't you? They hooked him up to a machine to see how he resonated. Anybody in the quantum physics besides me? Oh, gosh. And they hooked him up, and he was resonating with the frequency of the earth. And when you start speaking in tongues, hooked up to this machine, he started resonating with a different frequency. It started becoming like a frequency of heaven. How is the earth going to be redeemed? When we start resonating heaven into the earth, we're going to start shifting the frequency that's setting in the earth. How are you going to shift culture? By shifting the frequencies. It's like just redialing the radio and setting it to heaven's tune and letting it become a part of you to the point that it's like a part of you. They saw. It is not abstract knowledge, but knowledge of a mission that produces. That's what they saw. They saw grace setting on them that was producing mission. You know how they went out on mission? With what they resonated with. They didn't just go on a good idea. They just went because. So here's what I put, just so you know. I'm looking for people, not who can produce. I don't really care what you can do. I want to know what you're resonating with. I want to know what you have tapped into heaven and have pulled back, and it is a part of who you are. The rest of it don't matter. You see, we're sitting here trying to perfect ourselves when we'll never make it. Grace makes up the difference, so you can, as long as you can get up there, you may not even understand it, but you got something from heaven because you've had a little fellowship. And because that's part of you now you're in the earth, and I'm going to tell you something, you're actually of good to God then. Which just means I slammed you if you're not doing it. You actually have substance upon the earth where God can take your life and you can begin to release what's inside of you and see cultural change around you. But what happens if we don't get there? The culture around us tries to reset our resignation to the frequency it's trying to put on us. And we got to decide what I'm carrying is more valuable, it's greater, it's larger, it's more powerful, and by the way, got all of heaven backing me up. He's given it to me. So I asked this question, who's carrying the sound of grace? Who's fellowshipping with the mystery? Who has laid the mimicking and typical institutionalized Christianity aside for a life-giving sound? That's all cultural change, isn't it? That's like a whole different perspective of things. So what are you fellowshipping with? That really is the question, isn't it? Comes down to what are we fellowshipping with? We're going to have worship. In the midst of worship, are you singing songs or are you resonating the song? Are the words a part of you where we can close the overhead and shut it off because it's so part of you? If I took all your Bibles and they're all closed and you don't have them to lean on like a crutch, can you resonate with heaven? They didn't have no Bible in that day. Where'd they get their information? They talked with each other, but you know what they were talking? They were talking about what they had experienced fellowshipping with mysteries. An unbelievable grace. A great grace was resting on them. And we think about doing some stuff and trying to reproduce it, trying to mimic and copy and all this goofy. And it's like they got on their face and encountered God and came out of it changed, carrying something, and then wrote doctrine. Does that even sink into us? And we look at this. This is pure and holy and undefiled. This is His Word. And it didn't come because they had a Strong's Concordance. It didn't come because they were experts in Greek and Latin and Hebrew. It came because they got on their face and they found God, and when God started speaking, they just kept listening. And they came back and revisited it, and revisited it, and revisited it. And then Paul starts talking, like I spoke a couple weeks ago, out of Ephesians 3, that all men would fellowship with this mystery. And he's talking about grace. The grace that was upon the church. I mean, that is literally what he's wanting us to do. Let me run down these mysteries that Paul fellowshiped with. This will give you a homework assignment. How's that? You know what? If we all fellowship with these mysteries, we'd all be on the same page pretty quick. I mean, seriously. First thing you got to do is divide a mystery from prophecy. They're two different things. A mystery is an absolute. Prophecy is God's intentions. Pretty simple. We're looking for the absolutes of God when we fellowship with mysteries. Mysteries release the glory. Honor sustains the glory. But where there's no honor, there'll be no mystery revealed. Honor sustains glory. But where there's no honor, there'll be no mystery revealed. If you only hear a mystery, and that's where we're at, folks. I will just be real blunt with you, because you all know I love you. You about got me to cry just now, just thinking about it. I've given you so many revelations and mysteries, and you wonder how I get them. I have to fellowship with them to get them. But you've only heard them, and you don't know them. I'll give you these mysteries. The mystery of regeneration, 1 Timothy 3:16. I'm just going to give you the verse, tell you what it is. Paul fellowshipped with an understanding that the saints would be regenerated one day. It became part of who he was. You can see it in all of his writings. Constantly through the whole thing, he's fellowshipping with this. See, there is a grace in this hour for us to do this, to come into these mysteries, begin to resonate with them. The mystery of the indwelling Christ, Colossians 1:25 through 29. The riches of his glory of this mystery among the Gentiles, which is Christ in you, the hope of glory. My gosh, if we knew that. Think what we would do. Think how our unbelief would be gone. The mystery of the church, Ephesians 1 through 11. For this cause, I, Paul, the prisoner. Remember I said he was a prisoner of the mystery. Became a prisoner of it. A slave to it. And bonded to it. If you've heard of the dispensation of the grace. If you've even heard of the stewardship and the administration of grace. I'm talking to you. You heard of it this weekend. The Lord's talking to you. That you would know how that by revelation be made known unto me the mystery. Not hear it, know it. We have been, this was a weekend to receive the mystery of grace. To know it. To dive into it. And he talks about the mystery of the church, and he talks about the wisdom of God being on display, the manifold wisdom in verse 10. Here's a good one, and this is one I've never even thought of. Romans 11:25, the mystery of Israel's blindness. For Paul, it was a mystery of how could they reject the Messiah, the chosen one. After all of this, here's the signs pointing. And he studied it out and he realized there is a day coming for them. But the Gentiles are coming first. And he understood that. You see, when we come up with opposition to things that we don't see change, we don't understand the blindness in it. We don't understand the mystery of what God is doing or the ways or the path or any of those things of what he's trying to do. The mystery of the translation of the saints. Saints are regenerated, but saints are translated. 1 Corinthians 15:51. I'm not going to get into eschatology, but it says, I'll show you a mystery. We shall not all sleep, but shall all be changed. Remember what grace is? It's favor, but it's also the ability of God to create change. We shall all experience a grace that is unbelievable in the last day. Last moments of our lives. The mystery of iniquity. We covered a lot of iniquity this weekend. 2 Thessalonians 2:1-9, verse 7. The mystery of iniquity does already work. Only he who now letteth, let him until he be taken out of the way. Twisted thinking, lawlessness. I covered it this afternoon. Sin, transgression, iniquity. Which is the promise of Isaiah 54. By his stripes we're healed. Stripes means the binding together of wounds and bruises, which are dealing with transgression and iniquity. The guarantee of healing is when the saints do what it says, take care of your transgression, take care of your iniquity, and you're automatically guaranteed healing. You see, we don't do that. You all doing all right? Yeah. The mystery of the church as the bride of Christ. Ephesians 3:22-32. He talks about husbands and wives, and he talks about how they should treat each other. And then he says, this is a great mystery. There's only 2 times that he says it's a great mystery, and this is the second time. A mega mystery. And yet how many even understand the bride? Now you think about those things that Paul did with those mysteries and how he brought those to the church, and he formed and built his entire ministry around those mysteries. And if you're thinking of doing ministry or thinking of going into ministry, you better be resonating with some form of a mystery. And I look at some of these things, and some of these things, the bride of Christ, I did a 40-day fast and studied the bride of Christ out. Because I wanted to know that mystery. And I saw the 12 steps of a Jewish wedding and how we walk through those 12 steps as believers, paralleling. And in that time, I went through Song of Solomon, verse by verse, word by word, and came up with the class that we teach in the school. And here's the deal. What was happening, I was fellowshipping with that mystery. There was a grace to fellowship with that mystery. There was a grace to be on the fast for 40 days to get the mystery. And And you know, that's a class people love in school. They love that Song of Solomon class. Because it resonates heaven into them. You know, I can turn the Song of Solomon right now and I can teach you that class. It is so inside of me. But see, these are all the things that God is wanting us to fellowship with. And he just, you know, trying to find an exit here. It's like he's wanting us, I mean, this will sound so terrible. He's wanting us to stop trying to produce anything. Seriously. Because we're doing it in our humanity and our weaknesses. And he is wanting us to get in a place with him and get into heaven's throne room and hear a mystery from him and begin to resonate it into our spirit until we come out of that resonating it into the earth. And that's how, like Finney and these guys, they were resonating something, get on a train, and the frequency's going through the entire train. And people are crying out. I've had times like that where I've stepped in carrying something and it's so resonated. And that was my hope this week, that I would have the time to carry something in that would cause us to come into that place in him. Not to pass knowledge over, but to pass something resonating over. A frequency over. So that you would want to fellowship with it. So you would want to pursue it. So you'd want to go after it. So it would become a part of you. And they were all of one heart and one voice, and great grace was upon them. They were all of one heart and one voice. They were all of one frequency. They all had been fellowshipping with the same mystery. If we would just begin to fellowship with a singular mystery, all of us together, until we resonated with it, we'd have something that would cause people to have attention. It would like captivate people. You know, Lee was there at the house. We're watching old healing videos and stuff the other night. We're watching these guys. They're resonating with this thing. We watched some people raised from the dead. We watched a little Dave Hogan just to get ourselves like wound up. We watched A.A. Allen. We watched some guys who resonated. That's what I'm missing in this hour. That's why I love being around the latter rain prophets. They're resonating with something they experience still to this day. There's not too many of them guys around anymore. That's why I love Leonard Ravenhill. He resonated. Duncan Campbell resonated. They got into heaven and fellowshipped with what God was showing them. And you know what we do? We just come back and blurt it out. Blah, 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 blah. I'm spiritual. I saw something. I wonder what it'd be like if you fellowship with that for a couple weeks. What would that produce? Get back in that same place again. Get back in that same place again. Why I love that song, Thousands. It gets me back into a place that I experienced something from God. Gets me right back in that place again. I put on Kim and Alberto Riviera this week. I was captivated by one song. I played it probably 50 to 75 times this week. Why? Because it took me into a place in God. They had captured a frequency that was beckoning me to come. And I was coming to get something. I don't feel like I got it all. Don't even feel like I got very much of it. So I'm going to probably put that on in the next couple of days and get beckoned some more. And I'm going to keep going until I get what I need out of that place and let it stir and carry inside of me for a while. I mean, is it okay? You all right? Yeah. You know what I'm saying? It's just, man, we've got to do that. We can't keep. We're wasting the grace of God on our foolishness. We are not advancing, folks. We're crawling along and getting a few victories. I mean, I want to see us tear it apart. And then it's not cutting it. You all feel challenged? Good. That was my purpose. That's God's purpose. You need a fellowship. Well, that's all I have. You know, when God is done, He's done. Ready to worship? Ready to worship?